So let me ask you this. When you attend church, now I'm a born again Christian and I'm trying to get back into church more so than I should have been. And mainly for a lot of us when it comes to church, being in person, depending on whether or not our pastors or reverends or whatever would be rebellious against certain mandates and everything, or the governors or mayors would be like, hey, there's no big issue here, go ahead and have your service. For most of us, we've had to watch church online. And now that things are getting back into a normal state or semi-normal state of, hey, we can finally attend in person, you know, a lot of us are trying to get back into that groove. Me, I'm trying to get back into that groove as we speak, along with my mom. However, there are times that even pre-COVID, there are times that, you know, basically, pre-COVID, that basically our pastor, and this is the same with any church, but our regular pastor would be gone for a week or maybe two because he's either on vacation, spending time with family, in other states, like his parents in the Midwest, one of his sons in Florida, one of his sons in New Mexico. He'd be spending time with them, and mostly now that, they have grandchildren, trying to spend as much time with their grandchildren as possible. But when this happens, or if it's when he's going on one of those biannual, triannual, trips to Israel, where he and his wife also take some people from church to go along with them to walk the areas, walk the steps and everything that Jesus and his disciples walked, and visit the places where they taught and preached and all that. Usually when he does these kind of things, that's when we have a substitute pastor step in. Now we do have an associate pastor who came on board, I think, what was it, earlier this year, I believe. Yeah, earlier this year, late last year, he came on board. And, he's a good guy. He's very, he's like I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to say here is he's a good guy. He's truly invested in what he does, truly loves the Lord. There's no doubt about that. But, he seems to still be learning. I mean, he's young. He's younger than me. I'll put it that way. And he's obviously still learning. Because when he stepped in for our pastor this past Sunday, and my mom noticed this. She noticed this. It seemed even though he had to turn the mic on, he almost forgot to turn the mic on. When he turned it on, he still sounded very quiet. Like you could hear him, but he sounded very quiet. And for some odd reason, my mom felt like that kind of took away from, took away from kind of like the positiveness that she would get. Not necessarily, but it felt like it was taken away from it. Now, of course, we did hear about something that happened in front of the homes of one of our church friends that we've known for over a decade and a half. It was a tragic situation. And because of that tragic situation, people have been putting candles and everything in front of their home because of what happened. Now, nothing happened to their members of any of their family. Nothing happened to any of their family. Let me reassure you of that. Nothing happened. It was somebody across the way or in the vicinity. Somebody else. And it really kind of like brought the tone down a little bit, or kind of, helped in that manner. Very unnecessarily, but it did. But it wasn't just that either. You see, my mom also, well, we'll put it this way. She kind of doesn't like where the church is at right now. You see, our church doesn't have a building, doesn't have an established building like a lot of these churches do. It doesn't have an established one area to meet that's, theirs and that's it. Basically, our church is one of those churches that has to, financially build upon the money that's put into the offering to send out to various missions that they're part of, but also build upon the fact that, or also use the money, I should say, to build upon the fact that hopefully if some is put away, they could use that to buy their own building. Like there are some empty buildings right now in Patterson that used to house different businesses that would be perfect. That would be absolutely perfect from my mom's point of view for them to, put, the church in on a permanent basis. But unfortunately, they can't do that. Or let me correct myself. It's not that they can't do that. It's just that they unfortunately haven't thought about doing it. And I don't know if maybe because they haven't thought about doing it is maybe because they realize they can't do it because maybe the capacity limit or whatever. I don't know. But again, like I said, our church is basically one of those churches that, leases out a building for a day. That's what they do. We leased out the Hammond Senior Center in Patterson for several years. Basically, on Sundays, it became church. It became our building, or our church's building. That's what it became, and it would be like that as well when we would rent it out for Christmas Mass. We would do the Christmas Eve services, so it would be just like that as well. So it basically from what my mom would tell me, and even my family would tell me when they would visit, it felt like that was the natural place. It felt like a real, a nice place, a decent place to be. It worked. It was basically a workable place to go to have church. And when I really think about it, like I just said, it felt like as time went on, it was the church building. It was our building. It was the church's home on Sundays, on Christmas Eve service. Even though, as my mom has told me, and our pastors back this up as well, we are the church. Physically, a physical building to, worship in and everything is nice, but we spiritually are the church. And that's all that really matters. Buildings can always be replaced. And obviously that's something that our pastor's going by because, after COVID, because, when COVID hit, again, like all the churches across the country, they converted mostly to online. Now, they were doing online beforehand, but they were starting to really focus on it more so now or recently because of COVID. So a lot of people that would be at church physically in person were now watching it online in some capacity. Now the reason I bring all this up is, for some odd reason, like I was saying, normally when our pastor would, go out and, have these, trips and everything and be out of town, we'd have a substitute pastor. And sometimes that substitute pastor, and this is all pre-COVID, okay? Pre-COVID. That substitute pastor, he wouldn't continue off where our pastor left off on, let's say, the sermon that he began about a month ago, and every Sunday on a weekly basis, he would continuously, add on to, he would, continuously talk about, like, he would leave off in one chapter of the Bible and then come back to it the following week, or he would come back to it the following week, but also add on other chapters and books to tie into the sermon. Well, anytime, like I said earlier, that he would go out of town and, either it's because of the bi-weekly, tri-weekly, trip to Israel, or he would be out of town on vacation to spend time with family. Mostly we get a substitute pastor, and the substitute pastor, as I was saying, would not attempt to continue what he was doing, being our regular pastor. He would, instead, what the substitute pastor would do his own sermon. He wouldn't continue what the pastor was doing. He would do his own thing so that nothing, was basically, thrown off or anything like that. So he would continue, not continue, but he would come in and do his own sermon for that one week or those 2 weeks. He or she would be standing in for our pastor. And, pre-COVID, when we would meet at the senior center, that seemed okay. It seemed all right. Nothing was amiss. Even if something happened, we would talk about it. You'd kind of feel a little bit of somberness. But at the end of the day, or throughout the sermon, that somberness would just go away. It wouldn't be there anymore. And that's the Spirit, and that's the Holy Spirit basically making sure of that. But anyway, long story short, you wouldn't feel any offness, if you will. You wouldn't feel like that something's off or something just doesn't feel like it's clicking. Usually, you'd go to church, you'd hear the sermon that the substitute or stand-in pastor would give you, and then that's it. Afterwards you spend time with your friends, talking to them, thanking the substitute pastor for standing in, stuff like that. You pretty much be okay. Pretty much everything would be, as is. You basically a regular Sunday at church, and everything. Nothing would seem amiss. Really. Nothing would really seem amiss. But for some odd reason, this was the first time that my mom and I went to church since its relaunch because of, like I said, COVID, that it felt like something was off. And again, it wasn't just because of the tragic situation that happened in front of our friend's house, mind you. It wasn't just that. It just felt like something was missing. It's like something was not gelling. And for someone, and what my mom told me, because she had to vent this, what she told me is it felt like, the associate pastor, who, like I said, is younger than me, felt like he wasn't really speaking up much. He really wasn't, being very energetic. Like, even when he turned up his mic, as I mentioned earlier, he didn't sound like he was all there. Like, we don't know maybe the somberness of what happened, the tragedy of what happened in front of our friend's house, is what got to him. Or he just felt like something was off. It felt like something was off. And it wasn't just that either. It was also the building. You see, like I said, our church is the kind of church that, will lease out a building for a while. And this is why, as I mentioned, the senior center felt like it was becoming the church building, the home building, the home church building of our church for the many years we had it. Basically, it felt like, it didn't feel like it was a senior center, it felt like it was a church. Even though we knew it was a senior center, it felt more like it was becoming our church's own. But, as I was saying, our church is one of those churches that after the lease comes up, and you either renew it or you move on. And basically, long story short, because of COVID, the lease was canceled. The lease was basically expired, if you will. And instead of letting us, and I'm assuming, this is my assumption, I'm assuming that instead of letting our pastor try to work out some kind of deal that when things were up on the up and up, that we could go back in there, that is yet to happen because, believe it or not, they're still using the senior center, as far as I know, for vaccine shots. Yeah, they're still using it for vaccine shots. That's why I got my vaccine shot back, in the 2 months that I did earlier this year. The Mandela shot, that's where I got it, at the senior center in Patterson. But like I said, basically, like I said, basically the lease was abruptly, canceled, voided, whatever you want to call it. So because of that, our pastor, even while they would still we were basically like all the other churches, thanks to COVID, forced to do online. Well, I wouldn't necessarily force, God forgive me for saying that. I wouldn't necessarily say force, but basically put in a situation where we had to do mostly online. He tried to find another place. He tried to, like I say, renegotiate to get back in the senior center somehow. That didn't happen. He tried other areas. It didn't work. And so one of the first attempts were, okay, if we're going to get together, we'll just get together at our house. And that worked for a bit, but then he made the announcement that he had gotten one of the auditoriums, where he'd gotten the auditorium at the high school where my nephew used to go. He goes to another one now. But basically, he got the auditorium at the main high school in town. And we thought, okay, that's cool. He's got a building and everything. That's great. And he started, having service there. Basically allowing people that would want to attend to get a feel of what, it was going to be like. And then recently, a couple of weeks ago, they did the relaunch, and which me and my mom were there for. And that was great. We were there the following week afterwards. She was there. I didn't go, but she was there, the week after that. And then I finally went back this past Sunday. But what was, again, interesting about these 2 weeks, or the first 2 weeks, is everything seemed fine. Everything seemed okay. And even when I was gone, on that 1 week, everything was fine. But for some odd reason, this week felt like it was a little down, felt like something was off, if you know what I mean. And again, she looks at the fact that she's trying to figure out, okay, was it because of what happened, in front of our friend's house? That might have been it. Was it the fact that it felt like our associate and pastor was not really into it, or felt like he was very quiet or something. She was trying to basically figure out all these situations. But the other thing that I think really got her to vent to me about how she felt about service, and she's never really done it that much, if at all, is the fact that she doesn't like the building. She doesn't like the building because basically when we were in the senior center, we got to basically use... Sorry about that, but like I was saying, when we had the senior center, we were able to use chairs, not necessarily like this, but chairs that were kind of similar to this, but, they had the comfort on the back. They had the comfort, like they had the seat cushions and all that, and then the stuff on the back, and they were metal. Those kind of seats. And when we were done, we would spend time talking with each other, and we would spend time talking to each other as well as helping each other, put things away for the senior center to utilize the building for the rest of the week and be ready for us to use the following week or the following Sunday. So my mom, part of her venting, which again, she rarely does if at all, she basically felt that she felt like she was squashed. Honestly, she felt like she was squashed in the church. And I'm not saying squashed because overcrowded. No, squashed because the seats in the auditorium are really like close knit to each other. Not just, okay, one person sitting next to you and all that. No, that's not a problem. It's the way that the seats from a row perspective were made. In other words, it's like if I'm sitting down on this chair here and everything, and my mom's right next to me, that's not a problem. But if I want to get up, usually like right here, I'm getting up. That's not a problem if the rows are separated distantly. But this is how my mom feels. She feels like when she gets up, the seat is like right here. It's like literally right here. It's like she can barely get up, and it's like boom, right into the seat, if you catch my drift. That's how she felt. She felt squashed because of that. And it just, it just felt a little, like I said, just felt like something was off. And, it could be a numerous of reasons. And if my mom had a say in what goes on, which she could, there's no doubt, she could. She had a say in what goes on. She could speak up if she wanted to and say, look, this is my personal opinion. I know this is the best you could do for us right now. But honestly, I don't like being here. And I'm sure a lot of others, that come to church don't like it here either. And we need a better place. I know she'd want to say that, but out of respect and love for the pastor and his family and the effort they're trying to do to get the church back up and going, she's not going to say it. She's not, but that's how she feels. She just doesn't like the building. She doesn't. And as a matter of fact, I'll be honest with you, I don't have a problem with the building, as long as we have a place to go and, worship and, see friends and all that. I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem whatsoever. But if I was in my pastor's shoes, and Lord, forgive me for saying this. Lord, forgive me for saying this. But if I was in our pastor's shoes, honestly, folks, this is just me. Honestly, I would once in a while, depending on how nice the weather is for the time being or in the future, I once in a while would rent out the park. Because one of the things they used to do, even when he was pastoring at another church before he founded this one, basically, and the reason he was pastoring at one church before he founded this one is in between, and something happened that he caused them to get ousted or some reason. But anyway, like I said, if I was him, depending on the weather, I would rent out the park, because one of the things, as I was trying to say, that we used to do as a church, or he used to do as a church, is he would rent out the Memorial Park area, the right side where the picnic area is, and is one of the main areas where the rides are and everything during the Apricot Fiesta. I would rent out that side again once in a while and basically allow people to bring their own chairs so they could feel more comfortable. That's what I would do. That is something that I feel, I would do in his place. If the auditorium at the high school is the best place to do service indoors, that's fine. That's workable. But if I wanted to, make my brothers and sisters in the Lord feel more comfortable, and kind of maybe talk it over with my wife and all that, then I would probably say, hey, I'd probably go to the city and say, hey, can I rent out, the right side of Memorial Park again for a couple of services in the future, because the auditorium is great, but right now it's, there's a lot of people that don't, basically just say that the, auditorium at the high school is great and they still want to utilize it, but that, from a personal standpoint, they can kind of tell that some of the people there, some of the brothers and sisters in the Lord, don't feel very comfortable seating-wise and all that. And, obviously he can tell this because one of the things he talked about at the end of the relaunch service 3 weeks ago was he pointed out the fact that there was an auditorium, a new auditorium, if you will, being built at the high school that would be utilized not just for high school plays and events and all that, but also during the off season for like stage shows and everything. Not Broadway wise, but basically like community theaters and all that. So what he was saying is that he wants to try to get first dibs on that, because I'm assuming from what he's probably heard, the seating arrangements will be a little bit better for people to attend church in. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. But yeah, it's just been, like I said, it's been one of those services, this past Sunday, 48 hours ago, that just, for the first time, my mom, that I can think of, has vented about and felt like, in her personal opinion, it just doesn't feel the same. It just feels off. But, maybe that's because of what happened from a tragic standpoint in front of our friend's house. Maybe that's it, or maybe it's just the fact that my mom works and everything, and she's getting to that point age-wise, and I say this with all due love and respect, and she's getting at the point age-wise where basically she's not really wanting to get up early and leave on a weekend to go anywhere, even though church is a place you need to go and enjoy the worship and the fellowship, as she puts it. I think she's getting at that age, right now. And I think also with what's going on with some of the kids she has at her school right now, especially this one kid I've told you guys about that they actually had to send home today because, she did number 2, and it really just almost made my mom lose it. I think adding that to the equation and everything, it's one of those situations to where really she's just, I think she's just getting at that point in age where, as she gets older, like I said, she wants to travel less, unless it's local. She wants to travel less, when it comes to the further areas, than she can if it, like I said, if it's local and all that. And maybe that's it too. I don't know. But let me know what your thoughts are. Have you ever, for those of you that go to church physically in person, have you guys ever dealt with something like this? Where when the associate pastor or the substitute pastor comes in and it just feels a little off. What are your thoughts? Have you ever dealt with this? Maybe because of that, or if you felt, or maybe because of the building you're in, or whatever it is. Let me know. Comment down below. Live chat during the premiere. Like the video. Check me out at my Teespring store. Check me out at BW Roses on Patreon. BW Roses discussions on all your favorite audio podcast locations except for Pandora. So let's check me out on BW Roses on Vimeo for for pony music videos, AMVs, fan vids that you can't get anywhere else due to the here on YouTube, that is, due to the fact that they could be blocked. But let me know what your thoughts are, and I will talk to you later.